The cabin was calm with soft lights and the sound of engines humming in the background as passengers settled into their seats for the long flight across the ocean, and for a while everything seemed normal. People laughed quietly, some scrolled on their phones. Others leaned back with their eyes closed, and the flight attendants moved through the aisles with practiced smiles, offering drinks and checking seatbelts. At first, there was nothing strange about this flight, and most people felt safe in their seats. But in row 14 by the window sat a young woman who did not laugh or chat or play with her phone. She kept her eyes locked on the clouds outside her face. Quiet, her back straight, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She wore a plain gray sweater and old jeans, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked like anyone else, yet there was something about her stillness that made her different. The man seated beside her was a businessman in a sharp suit, his gold watch. Catching the light every time he moved, he had seen her switch seats before takeoff. She had asked him softly if she could sit by the window in 14F. At first, he smirked, thinking she was nervous or just picky. "Every seat is the same," he muttered with a sneer. "Do you think you are a pilot or something?" But she had not answered. She had only slid into the seat with steady, calm movements as if she had done this before. Now, as the cabin relaxed, she whispered almost to herself, "Something is moving out." There, her voice was low, but the man beside her heard and rolled his eyes again. He looked around at the other passengers and shook his head, whispering to them that she was strange, just some nervous girl playing games. A few chuckled quietly, believing him. But the young woman stayed still, her gaze unbroken, her breath fogging the window slightly as she leaned closer. It was as if she could read the clouds, as if she was searching for something hidden in the white mist. Families sat together laughing over snacks. Children waved at each other across the aisle. College students tapped on their screens with earbuds dangling from their ears. An older woman with pearls leaned back, reading a magazine. Her nails painted a sharp red. Everything looked peaceful, and yet the young woman in 14F seemed untouched by it all, as if she already knew peace would not last. She had boarded quietly earlier, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She had not spoken to anyone or smiled. She had not asked the attendants for help. She had simply walked in, found her seat, and waited, her movements quiet but confident, like she belonged, yet did not need to be noticed. The only time she had spoken before now was when she had asked to switch seats, and that was not a request. It was almost like a statement. The businessman kept watching her, suspiciously tapping his gold watch as if trying to prove he was in control. He scoffed again. "This seat is no different from the others. What makes you think you need this one?" But she did not answer. She kept her eyes on the sky. The air in the cabin was warm and safe, yet under her gaze it suddenly felt heavier. Her whisper about something moving outside echoed in his head. He laughed nervously, trying to push away the thought. But his laughter did not sound strong. It sounded weak. One row across a woman in a blazer leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the plain gray sweater the young woman wore. "If you want people to listen, honey, you should dress the part," she said with a practiced smile, her tone sharp, her laugh cutting through the air like glass. A few passengers smiled along, mocking the quiet girl in the window seat. The young woman finally turned her head slightly, her voice calm but clear enough for them to hear. "Clothes do not fly, planes." The woman in the blazer faltered, her red nails tapping against the armrest as if her confidence had cracked just a little. The businessman chuckled louder. Oh, now she gives fashion advice too. But his voice no longer carried the same confidence. His smirk looked weaker now. The quiet girl did not say anything more. She only reached for the window shade and lowered it halfway, her movement slow, precise, like she was shutting a door on their laughter. The air seemed to shift with her action. Passengers glanced at each other, curious, uneasy. Something about her stillness made their jokes fall flat. Mark, the tall flight attendant with a clipped mustache, noticed the tension. He walked down the aisle, smiling tightly. "Let's keep things calm, folks," he said, his voice polite but tight. He turned to the girl in the gray sweater. "Please, ma'am, just relax and enjoy your seat. Pick a meal soon, we will be serving." She gave no answer, only nodded slightly and looked back. Out the window. The businessman leaned closer again, whispering sharply. "What do you mean? Something is moving out there. Are you trying to scare people?" His tone was biting, but behind it there was a flicker of nervousness. A woman across the aisle, maybe in her 60s with pearls around her neck, clucked her tongue. "Young lady, you should not say things like that. You are scaring passengers." Her tone was fake, sweet but full of judgment. The quiet girl ignored them. She rested her fingers lightly on the armrest, her eyes never leaving the window. It was like she already knew what was coming and she was waiting. Then it happened. The cockpit alarm roared through the cabin, sharp and urgent. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone tight. "This is your captain. We have detected a high-speed contact on radar. Please remain seated." Every passenger froze, necks craning, eyes widening, whispers rushing through the aisles, fear rising like a wave. The businessman turned pale, his gold watch glinting as he gripped his armrest harder, his smirk gone completely. He glanced at the woman beside him with sudden shock, as if realizing she had seen what no one else could see. And through it all, the young woman stayed calm, her eyes fixed on the clouds outside, waiting for the moment she knew was coming. The alarm still echoed through the cabin, the sharp sound buzzing in every ear as passengers sat frozen in their seats. Some whispered prayers, others clutched the hands of their loved ones. The businessman beside the young woman broke into sweat, his sharp tongue finally silent, his gold watch glinting as his hand trembled. The captain's voice repeated over the speaker, his tone urgent. "Remain calm. We are investigating the radar contact. Please stay seated and follow crew instructions yet." Calm was gone from the cabin, the air thick with fear. The young woman in the gray sweater did not flinch, her eyes never left the window. Her breath fogged the glass for a brief moment before clearing again. She leaned slightly forward as if she could see something beyond the clouds, something no one else could see. The businessman leaned closer, his voice low but sharp. "What did you mean? Something is moving out there. How did you know before the captain said anything?" He wanted to sound brave, but fear cracked his voice, his words shaking like paper in the wind. The young woman said nothing, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her fingers brushing the strap of her backpack tucked under the seat. Across the aisle, the older woman with the pearls spoke again, her voice rising above the whispers. "This is your fault, young lady. You said something was coming now. It is happening. You brought this fear on us." Her words full of blame, her pearls clicking together as her hands shook. Another passenger, a man in a polo shirt, his face red from too many drinks, stood up, pointing at her loudly. "She is playing with us. She is trying to scare everyone. She thinks she knows more than the pilots." His slurred voice drew nods from some passengers. Others murmured, in fear. The flight attendant. Mark hurried over his mustache, twitching his smile. "Tight. Folks, please calm down. We must remain in control." He turned to the young woman, his tone firm. "Ma'am, do not make statements that alarm others. Please just stay quiet until we have instructions." His words were polite but sharp, his eyes pleading for her cooperation. The young woman still did not answer. She lowered the window shade halfway and leaned back, her movements slow, deliberate, like she was measuring. Every second the businessman leaned back as well, but his eyes darted nervously from her face to the window. Then a little voice cut through the panic. A child no older than 6, sitting on his mother's lap, looked at the young woman with wide, curious eyes. "Miss, what did you see?" he asked, his voice soft yet clear enough for the nearest roused to hear. The mother pulled him close, whispering, "Do not talk to her." But her own eyes were fixed on the stranger, curiosity fighting with fear. The woman in the blazer with sharp red nails, snapped loudly. "Do not encourage her, she is just looking for attention." Her laugh was hollow forced, but her eyes betrayed fear. The young woman in the gray sweater finally moved. She reached into her backpack slowly and pulled out a small keychain shaped like a tiny plane. Its metal worn from age, she handed it across the aisle to the child. "Hold this," she said softly, her voice calm, steady. Like she had rehearsed the words, the mother hesitated, but took it, her hands trembling. The businessman sneered again, though weaker than before. "What is this now, giving toys to children? What are you trying to prove?" His voice cracked on the last word. The young woman turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. Her voice quiet, but strong. "If I wanted to prove something, you would already know." His mouth opened, then shut, no words. Left gasps spread through the cabin as a flash of light cut across the window. For a brief moment, passengers saw it, a dark, sleek shape moving through the clouds. The fighter jet was real close and coming fast. Whispers turned into cries. People pressed against windows, trying to see fear spread like fire. The older woman with pearls shrieked, clutching her necklace tighter. The drunk man shouted louder. "She knew about this. She warned us. She must be involved. Tie her up, restrain her." He stumbled closer, his face red, his hands shaking. Other passengers began to murmur agreement. Some nodded, their faces twisted in panic, their fear turning into anger. At the quiet woman, Mark, the flight attendant, raised his voice firm enough to cut through the noise. "Everyone sit down. We are trained for this. Remain calm," but even he trembled as he spoke. The businessman jabbed a finger toward the woman beside him, his voice cracking. "She sees through clouds. She thinks she can fly planes. Maybe she is signaling them." His words drew more whispers, suspicion spreading like poison. The young woman stayed seated, her face unreadable. She did not argue. She did not defend. Herself, her gaze fixed once again on the window, her hands relaxed on her lap. The jet outside grew clearer, cutting through the sky with terrifying speed. The cabin shook with shouts and fear. The little boy still clutched the small plane keychain, his eyes wide, staring at the woman in gray as if he trusted her more than anyone else in the room. The captain's voice came again, this time with strain in his words. "Passengers, we confirm high-speed contact approaching extreme speed. We are in communication with air control. Brace for possible impact." His voice cracked the line, cut for a second silence, then returned. "Stay in your seats." The cabin erupted into chaos. Screams, prayers, angry shouts, people yelling at the woman in gray, blaming her, accusing her, calling her dangerous. Yet through the storm, she did not move. She only whispered so softly that only the nearest few heard. "If they have not fired, there is still a way out." The businessman whipped his head toward her, his face pale. "What did you just say?" His voice sharp, but his fear too loud for him to hide. She gave no answer. And then the jet came into full view, racing closer and closer, its dark shape slicing through the clouds, heading straight toward them, as every passenger braced for what would come next.
The fighter jet outside cut through the clouds, its sharp body black against the white sky, and the passengers gasped louder, fear spilling across the cabin like a wave. People leaned against windows, eyes wide, voices rising in panic and disbelief. The captain's words from the speaker still hung in the air. High-speed contact approaching extreme speed. Remained seated, but nobody was calm anymore. The cabin was fire with shouts. The businessman's voice cracked as he pointed at the young woman in the gray sweater. "She said it before anyone else. She knew before the captain did. How is that possible?" His voice sharp and trembling at once. A man in a hoodie stood up, his earbuds hanging around his neck. "She has to be working with them," he cried out. "Why else would she know?" He was young, his face pale, but his fear made his voice loud. The older woman with the pearls nodded, her hands clutching her necklace. "This is no accident," she insisted. "She is dangerous. She is the reason we are in this mess." Her voice high-pitched, shaking with fear but filled with blame. The passengers turned their eyes to the young woman, their stares hard, some frightened, some furious, their whispers buzzing through the air. "Tie her down, restrain her, throw her in the back. Do not let her sit there. She is putting us at risk." A younger flight attendant with a tight bun hurried down the aisle, her face pale, her clipboard clutched in her hands, her voice strained. "Ma'am, you need to stop talking, you are upsetting the cabin, please sit still and stay silent," her tone professional but her eyes revealed her fear. The young woman in the gray sweater did not rise, she did not flinch, she looked out the window, her eyes calm, her hand resting lightly on the strap of her backpack. The drunk man in the polo shirt raised his voice louder, his face flushed. "We cannot let her sit here, she is a spy," he yelled. "She is signaling that jet with her eyes." The more he spoke, the more the crowd stirred. Mark, the older flight attendant, tried to calm the storm, his voice firm. "Everyone remain seated, please, you are safe, this is under control," but even his voice cracked at the edges, betraying doubt. The little boy, still holding the small plain keychain, looked at the young woman with wide eyes. "Miss, are you going to save us?" His words soft, innocent, cutting through the noise for a moment. His mother hushed him, pulling him close, but she too stared at the stranger as if waiting for an answer. The young woman finally spoke, her voice low but clear enough to carry. "I am not in charge, but someone has to be," she said slowly, the weight of her words pressing into the air like iron, her tone calm but carrying a strength that made even the drunk man freeze. The businessman scoffed again, trying to hide his fear. "She is lying," he said. "She cannot know what she is talking about," but his voice lacked power now. The passengers whispered louder, some siding with him, others watching the woman with suspicion as if she carried secrets heavier than the plane itself. The captain's voice cracked over the intercom again. "We confirm fighter jet visual, extreme speed approaching. We are in communication with air traffic control." His voice tight, shaky, the words rattling through the cabin like a warning bell. Gasps echoed, people cried, mothers clutched their children, older men gripped their armrests, prayers whispered through the air, the fear unbearable. The young woman leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the jet outside, her whisper soft but clear enough for those near. "If they have not fired yet, there is still a way out," her words so calm it was chilling, as if she spoke about the weather, not death rushing at them. "What did you say?" snapped the businessman, his face white, his voice cracking. "Say it again, what do you know?" The young woman did not answer, she just kept watching the sky, her expression calm, unreadable. The passengers were restless, voices rising. "Tie her up, she is working with them, she is a danger," one shouted, others agreed, nodding their heads, their fear turning them into a mob. The flight attendant with the tight bun fumbled with a seatbelt strap, her voice trembling. "We may need to restrain her," she said, her eyes darting nervously toward the other attendants. The businessman's face red with anger and fear leaned close. "She is tricking us, she is dangerous, we cannot trust her," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. The older man in a tweed jacket stood slowly, his cane shaking in his hand, his voice unsteady but loud enough to reach the crowd. "I have been flying for 50 years and I have never seen anything like this. She is not normal." The whispers swelled, agreement rolling through the cabin, eyes locking on the woman in the gray sweater, the weight of suspicion crushing the air. Her eyes met the old man's for a moment, then she tilted her head slightly, acknowledging his words, her reply quiet but sharp. "Normal does not stop jets." Her words cut through the noise, leaving silence for a second, then the crowd stirred again, louder, more fearful, some ready to act, some too frozen to move. The drunk man stepped forward again, his hands shaking. "Tie her up now," he shouted, "she is one of them." Mark raised his arms, blocking him, his voice stern. "Sit down, sir," he said, but his own voice trembled, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. The captain's voice came once more. "Passengers remain calm. Passenger in 14F, please report to the cockpit immediately." His words sudden, direct, every head turned at once. The cabin went silent, every eye fixed on her, the young woman in gray, her calm face unreadable. The businessman's jaw dropped, the pearl woman gasped, clutching her necklace tighter. The drunk man fell back into his seat, pale with shock. The aisle opened, the flight attendants stepped aside, waiting, their eyes wide, the air filled with a tense silence. The young woman stood slowly, her movement steady, graceful. She slung her backpack over her shoulder, her eyes never leaving the front of the plane, and she began to walk down the aisle, every gaze following her like a shadow. The aisle felt heavy as the young woman in the gray sweater walked forward, her backpack strap over her shoulder, her step steady, while the entire cabin stayed silent, every passenger watching with eyes wide, some filled with fear, some with anger, and others with curiosity. The businessman's face was pale, his gold watch glinting as his hand shook against the armrest. He whispered to the woman with pearls, "She is in on this, she is not normal." The older woman nodded, her pearls rattling as she clutched them tighter, her lips pressed thin. The drunk man muttered something under his breath, but he did not rise again. The child with the keychain plane held it tightly in his hand, his small eyes following the woman as if she was the only safe thing left in the sky. Mark, the flight attendant with the clipped mustache, led the way, his tall frame stiff, his voice forced. Calm, ma'am, this way please, his tone polite but tight. He did not look her in the eye. As she reached the cockpit door, whispers buzzed behind her. Who is she? Why her? Why does the captain want her? The voices rose and fell like waves of fear. The door opened and the cabin lights dimmed for a moment as she stepped inside the cockpit. The pilots turned their heads, their faces pale, beads of sweat on their foreheads. The captain looked older than his years, his voice low and urgent. You said something was coming before our radar picked it up. How did you know? The co-pilot, younger with wide eyes, leaned closer, his voice sharp but shaking. Who are you? His hand trembling on the controls. The young woman did not answer right away. She moved closer to the radar screen, her eyes scanning the green lines and dots. She leaned slightly forward, her tone calm, measured. Let me talk to them. The captain blinked, confused, his hands gripping the wheel tighter. Talk to them? What do you mean? She turned her head toward the radio, her voice steady. Switch the channel to secure military frequency. Her tone carried no doubt, only command. The co-pilot looked at the captain, shaking his head. This is insane. We cannot hand her the radio. She is a passenger. The captain hesitated, his jaw clenched, his voice quiet, desperate. But what if she is right? His eyes heavy with fear but also hope. The young woman's gaze did not waver. She lifted her hand slightly as if reaching for the mic, her voice calm, almost cold. If you want to survive, give me the channel. The cockpit was silent for a breath, then the captain moved his hand slowly, switching the frequency. He pressed the mic into her palm, his fingers trembling. She held it with ease, her movements smooth like second nature. She pressed the button, her voice low, precise. Shadow 1 requesting clearance. Identify yourself. The co-pilot gasped, his mouth open. Shadow 1, that unit was shut down years ago. It does not exist. His words barely louder than a whisper, his eyes locked on her as if she had spoken a ghost. The radio crackled, static filling the air for a moment that felt endless. Then a clipped male voice answered. Shadow 1, this is Shadow 2, confirm status, stand down. The captain froze, his eyes wide, his mouth hanging open, his hands trembling. Shadow 1, he repeated softly, that was decommissioned 5 years ago. The co-pilot stared at her, his voice sharp, almost desperate. Who are you? What are you? She did not look at him. She handed the mic back, her voice calm, controlled. You are safe now. The captain shook his head, whispering again. Shadow 1, impossible. The young woman turned toward the cockpit door, her movements smooth and unhurried. She opened it and stepped back into the cabin, every passenger waiting in tense silence. The businessman stood, half rising, his face red, his voice loud. She is tricking them. She hacked the radio. She is dangerous. The older woman with pearls nodded furiously, her hands shaking. She is lying. She is no soldier. The woman in the blazer with red nails shouted over them all. Do not believe her. She is nothing but a fraud. The young woman said nothing. She walked down the aisle, her calm face unchanged, her backpack strap still resting on her shoulder. Passengers leaned away as she passed, their eyes wide, their fear turning into confusion. The little boy whispered softly to his mother, Miss, is she a pilot? His mother said nothing, her eyes glued to the woman. The drunk man sneered weakly. She fooled them all, but his voice cracked, his fear clear. The jet outside tilted its wing, a slow deliberate motion like a salute. Gasps filled the cabin, passengers pressed to the windows watching as the fighter jet shifted position, flying alongside them, no longer rushing to strike but guarding. The captain's voice came through the intercom, soft, stunned. They saluted her. The cabin went silent, even the children stopped whispering, even the businessman froze pale as snow, even the pearl woman let her necklace slip from her fingers, her lips trembling. The jet remained at their side, steady like an escort, the shadow of its wings stretching over the commercial plane. The passengers looked from the window to the young woman in gray sitting back down in her seat, her face calm, her eyes still on the sky. The silence stretched heavy, filled with awe and fear. The little boy's voice broke through again, small but clear. Miss, do you know how to fly jets? Her head turned slightly, her expression softening just a little, her reply simple but firm. I used to. The cabin erupted again, whispers, shouts, questions. Who is she? What is she? Why her? The noise rising like a storm. But the young woman did not answer. She only leaned against the window, her reflection faint in the glass, her hand resting gently on her backpack strap, tracing the faded patch sewn there, a small military insignia barely visible unless you were looking for it. The cabin buzzed like a hive, restless, confused, scared yet curious, every gaze fixed on her as if waiting for the truth to fall from her lips. And then the captain's voice came again, sharper this time. Passengers, we are not clear yet. If she is wrong, we will be shot down. The words cut through the silence like a knife. The whispers turned to shouts again, anger and panic surging back. The businessman rose again, pointing his finger. She is lying, we cannot trust her, she will get us all killed. The Pearl Woman clutched her armrest, her voice trembling. She is not one of us, she brings danger. The crowd stirred, voices overlapping, fear rising until the cabin shook with chaos again, all eyes turning to the woman in gray, waiting for her next move.